It was a crazy, crazy case.
Luz Cuevas lost a baby to a fire.
But she had a firm belief that her daughter was still alive and was living with her kidnapper. That certainly sounded wild.
Could you just not accept that your child had perished in a fire? Is there something else going on? Is it wishful thinking?
Could have been a mother who had mental illness.
Is it mother's intuition?
No la acepta, se volvió loca también.
I thought Lucidia was wrong. This woman's crazy.
I think she did really believe that this was her child. We had to look into this with Ernest. We were going to investigate her claim.
An autopsy report stated that the baby was completely consumed by the fire.
How hot was that fire?
It was a heavy amount of fire. No one could have survived.
I start feeling something wasn't right.
Somebody was in your home and set your home on fire, and you were powerless to stop it.
The story, as it evolved, became more and more challenging. There were so many disconnects. There were so many improbabilities. There were a lot of questions that remained unanswered.
The truth is always better than fiction.
Lucidia Cuevas and Pedro Vera, who lived 2 doors down from me on Hurley Street. They had something cute, adorable, you know, the kind of relationship we all hope to have.
Éramos una familia feliz. Yo me fui para Filadelfia en el año 90 para poder trabajar porque en Puerto Rico no había trabajo. Yo tenía 27 años cuando conocí a Lucidia. Yo la encontré en la escuela, en el salón. Me enamoré de ella. Una y tenía un cuerpo bien bonito. Parecía una guitarra. Ahí, cuando ya decidimos vivir juntos, pues nos fuimos para una casa que es Hurley Street, la calle.
They lived at the end of the block with 2 little boys. And Pedro's mother, Lucidia, was pregnant.
Pero ese fue el día más feliz que yo me sentí, cuando nació mi hija, de Limar. Sí, la vi tan gordita y tan linda. Estábamos los más felices, todo estaba ahí. Aquel día, el 15 de diciembre, no, eso fue algo tremendo. Me destruyó la vida.
December the 15th, 1997. I'm watching TV with my stepson, and I heard a blood-curdling scream. I run to go see what's going on. I throw open the window. There's a fire 2 doors down, Lucidia and Pedro's house.
Call came in around 7 o'clock. We get dressed, jump on the truck, and respond. We can see the smoke from a block away.
When I looked out the window, the glow of the fire was on the 2nd floor, the same level that I was on it. I climbed through the ledge. I grabbed the hose. I smash the window, I throw my leg in, I duck my head in, I bring the hose in, and I can't see anything.
Yo estuve en la casa de mis primos. Carolina era como una prima hermanastra. Y cuando ella viene, tocando la puerta, y yo, ¿qué te pasa? Mira, se quemó tu casa. Que ahí mismo yo me caí, janqué para allá.
We got there within 3 minutes. Once we arrived, we can see fire ripping out of the 2nd floor windows. We went in, there was no fire on the 1st floor. Everything was clear. We made our way to the steps. We stopped at the top of the steps. We began playing water from there into the hallway. We fought it from there and pushed our way into the front bedroom.
Allá me volví loco. El bombero, no, no suba, que te vas a quemar.
I see the mother of Luciana, and she is beside herself. The horrified, the sad, the frightened, the just absolutely, the look on her face was like, I wanted to be able to go back in, but I knew that I couldn't.
Front bedroom was where most of the fire was. We stayed there until everything was extinguished. Once the smoke lifts, you can start to see the contents of the bedroom. And the first thing I saw was a bed, and that was completely consumed. One of the firefighters came in, and I heard him say, she said the baby's in here. Just took me back, and I was like, a baby? There's nothing left in here. It was a heavy amount of fire. No one could have survived. No, not even a full-grown person could have survived that fire.
Ahí fue que yo dije, pero ¿dónde está mi nena?
A few minutes later, the fire marshal came out with a tarp cover. There was a body inside. He doesn't hit you until you see the fire marshal come out with the tarp. When he came out, I saw the dad let out a big scream and just put his head down.
Para mí, el peor de mi vida, porque me encontraron los restos. Y yo lo miré y dije, oh my God, y bajé la vista y me volví loco, pegué a llorar. Y me volví loco porque decía, contra Dios, mi única hija, y se me murió en fuego. Eso es lo que yo hablaba con Dios, decía, si yo no he hecho nada malo en la vida, para que me tenga que castigar así.
Everybody else is just like paralyzed, watching. I saw Luciana crumble when the fire department came. She just collapsed.
Pedro Vera is in shock after the tragic loss of a daughter he had only just begun to know. Delamar Vera was only 10 days old.
Fire. That's all. I can see my daughter.
He was in shock. That's when everybody started screaming and crying. I was led towards Pedro to translate for him. So this is one of the things he told us, that he didn't have enough to pay for the heating, so he had to use a space heater to heat up the room.
Moments after the baby's body was removed from the scene, fire officials announced the cause of the fire.
What we had here was like electrical wiring actually spliced together, and then that wiring was connected to a space heater. And the electrical wiring was too much for the space heater, and it created the fire.
Ahí yo pensé, yo dije, ¿sería yo el culpable por ese heater o...? No quiero ni hablar.
Pedro looked like he had ran a marathon. He looked like he was just mentally, like, broken. Not exhausted, but broken. There must have been a great deal of sadness and difficulty for both of them.
Después del incendio, pues ya no era lo mismo. Tú mirar tu casa quemada, después no tener tu hija, no es fácil. Abrazamos, lloramos. Bueno, eso fue algo tremendo. Aquel día, el 15 de diciembre, me destruyó la vida.
In 2004, I was a Philadelphia police lieutenant at Special Victims Unit in charge of the child abuse section. And we handled a wide range of child investigations. They're difficult to investigate. Evidence is not necessarily conclusive, and the objective facts are often elusive. Now, in February of '04, I received a call from a colleague and a friend, prosecutor from the district attorney's office in the juvenile court, asked me to look into a case that he became aware of. A case that had happened years before, I think it was in '97. There was a house fire, and a newborn baby had perished in that fire. Told me the story of a woman that had come to him about a child that she believed her child had never perished in that fire. In fact, was living with her kidnapper. In 2004, we became aware of a woman who had a firm belief that a baby perished in a house fire was in fact still alive, and in fact living with the person who not only caused the fire, but kidnapped her child. The mother told people in her family back then that she thought her child was alive, and people would say, let it go, she's dead. Delamar, the child's dead, let it go. It sounded wild, a wild kind of case, and a kind of bizarre case. Police often have a natural skepticism. This could have been a bizarre tale. It could have been a mother who had mental illness. It could have been a mother who was still grieving her lost child and was focusing on someone else's child.
Luzaida, después que pasó todo eso, cogía la toalla y pegaba. Voy ahora que estoy durmiendo la nena. Yo la miraba y eso me partía el corazón. Yo decía, ay, Dios mío. Cuando la vi sufriendo me puse bien triste, pero a la misma vez, para Luzaida y para mí, nos destruyó la vida. Acabó todo. Nos separamos. En el 2002 nos separamos. Fíjate, ella siempre tuvo el feeling de que algo, tenía una esperanza. Ella siempre tuvo la esperanza, como una esperanza de animal, de que mi hija estuviera viva y mira.
We got in touch with the woman. The next day, Luzaida came to our office for an interview. She spoke very little English. She told us she attended a birthday party, and it was kind of a mixed family. You know, there were a lot of people there. Some were blood relatives, some were not. Some were in-laws, some were acquaintances of in-laws. And at the party was this little girl. She was struck by the fact that she looked like her. She looked like Luzaida. A young version of her, but she looked like Luzaida. And she was awestruck. She had deep, deep dimples. I think that was something that Luzaida recognized and made an association with herself. The little girl spoke to Luzaida. She told her name, Aaliyah Hernandez, and she was convinced that this, in fact, was her child. She knew she had to do something. And she didn't want to create a scene because there were a lot of people there and a lot of people wouldn't have believed her, and it could have gotten nasty. So she approached the child and told her, oh, I think you have something in your hair. Can I cut it out? And she cut a couple strands of hair, thinking, now at last I have some concrete evidence that can prove that this child is in fact my child. The evidence, she had it in a little plastic baggie, and those couple strands of hair. When she sees Aaliyah's mother, they look nothing alike. And Luzaida, she recognizes her because 6 years prior, she came to their house, to Pedro and her house, the eve of the fire, to speak to Pedro. She said her name was Carolyn Correa. It was a crazy, crazy kind of scenario. We wanted to remove doubt. And she was accusing someone whom she knew, basically accusing her of arson and kidnapping. Pretty serious charges. We didn't do a DNA analysis on the strands of hair. Back then, you needed a root, and there were no root here. And we couldn't say where the hair came from. It wasn't the greatest evidence in the world. So we had to settle the score on this somehow. We had to look into this with Ernest. We were going to investigate her claim. Caroline Correa lived in Willingboro, New Jersey. And because it's a different jurisdiction, we had to go first to the local police authorities, and that would be Willingboro Police Department.
To see a child once at a birthday party and believe it's your child begs the consideration of, could you just not accept that your child had perished in a fire? Is there something else going on? Is it wishful thinking? Is it mother's intuition? There's a lot of different ways to look at that reaction, that she knows that it's her child. So I think a lot of people would find it difficult to believe because it just sounds like after one encounter, you know this is your child. Like, it's not like there was a lot of interaction prior to that, or she had observed the child grow. My job is to have an open mind and go where the evidence takes you. It may not be the conclusion that the mother wanted, but at least she would have an answer.
When we started the investigation, we had to start at the beginning. And the beginning was the reports of that night from the objective observers, the responding uniformed police, the responding firefighters, the responding medics. They had no axe to grind. They had no motive to lie. The fire department did rule it as accidental fire caused by a faulty space heater wiring. The fire department had it out within 14, 15 minutes. They knew they were looking for a baby because the mother was outside. My baby's in there, my baby's in there. They found plaster, sheetrock, and a lot of debris. But they also found what looked to be bone, melded into fabric like clothing and sheets and bedding, and also a cot. One of the fire department carried out these remains, and it was reported at the time these remains may actually be the remains of the baby.
When we talk about fires, they're very destructive, and things that the fire departments do are very destructive. And things that firefighters do, which is called overhaul, is very destructive. They pull ceilings down, or, they move things around, in order to fight the fire. So, dealing with a crime and fire together is always very difficult. They're not doing anything wrong, they're just doing their job. So definitely made it a little bit more difficult to make the connections, right, between what we believe might be true, and what we actually have proof of.
This is the report of the autopsy. It says on December 15th, 1997, an autopsy was done on nothing. No human tissue was found in the clump of material that was delivered to the medical examiner. The infant was then presumed to have been completely consumed by the fire. I looked at that and I thought, well, if they think the child was completely consumed to nothing, how hot was that fire? And I looked up, cremation, the process of cremation. And what I learned was it takes about 1,000 degrees temperature gas for about an hour to 2 hours to almost completely consume a body, but not all of it. Bones will still remain, and in fact, they're crushed later on. The cause of death was completely consumed by fire. The fire was not that intense. It didn't reach the temperature or the time necessary. And it didn't make sense.
When we asked both the medical examiner's office and the current fire marshal, they both had noted that in all of their years of experience, they think that it's not feasible that even a 10-day-old infant would be completely consumed by the fire, that there should have been some sort of remains.
They couldn't find the child. All they found was debris, building debris, charred furniture, water stained. It was a mess. And they were throwing a lot of the debris out onto the front yard just to clear the room to see if there was any remains there. They found no remains. Not in the house, nor did they find on the next day. They went back out and scoured the front and found no human remains. No baby there. There was no end. There was no body. We wanted to speak to both Luciда and Pedro about the night of the fire and what they maybe remembered.
El 15 de diciembre, durante la tarde, apareció la mejor amiga de mi hermana. Caroline era que mi tío la crió y viene siendo como una prima hermanastra. Pues ese día que Carol vino a visitarme a mi casa, pues ella me dijo que me tenía que ir a un trabajo. Yo ese entonces ya yo no tenía trabajo ahí. Me dijo, pues vente que te voy a llevar a ver un trabajo. Pues yo me vestí y dije, dale, vamos. Yo le dije, pues dale, vamos para el trabajo, que yo necesito trabajo y ahora más que tengo mis hijos, mi hija.
She told Pedro that she could help him get a job, but he'd have to come with her. So she left. But she didn't take him to an employment agency or an employer anywhere. She took him instead to his cousin's house.
Vino y dijo, se me olvidó la cartera. Espérame aquí con tus primos que voy a ir a buscarla. Y ella se fue a buscar la cartera.
She drove back then to Lucida's house and knocked on the door and said, oh yeah, I forgot my purse. Lucida let her in. And she told Lucida, well, I have to use the bathroom. So after going upstairs to use the bathroom, Carolyn come back downstairs and they exchanged some small talk. And Lucida went upstairs to check on the baby. And she found the baby had been moved from the bed to the crib. The baby was fine. The baby was sleeping. Lucida come downstairs and, why'd you move the baby? And Carolyn told her, I was afraid she would roll off the bed. And so I put her in a more safe place.
Which, you know, made Luz really think, this is a weird thing. I don't know why someone would touch someone else's baby. And I don't think a 10-day-old could roll off a bed.
It's no more than 10 minutes later, there was a bang from upstairs. Lucida went up to investigate this. She found fire in the front bedroom.
When she runs up to check on her daughter, she can't find her.
The smoke was thick, and she got repelled from the fire. And the fire got more intense, and she ran downstairs, tried to get help, yelling to the neighbors, call the fire department, call out my house, my baby's upstairs, my house is on fire. Carolyn was with her and ostensibly gave her comfort. At this point, Carolyn left. I'm aware of mothers who have lost their child, but this circumstance was entirely different. This was, my baby's there, my baby's not there. She had reason to believe that there's something off here. There was no conclusion for her. There was a lot of media attention to this case. I wanted all that footage assembled so that we could investigate it and examine it to see if it would help us in any way. Carolyn Correa, she was there at the fire scene. She stayed there for a bit, and then she drove off. But she was there. You know, the news footage captures her profile and Pedro's full face at the fire scene. So yeah, Lucida said Carolyn was there, and she was. The story, as it evolved, became more and more challenging. There were so many disconnects. There were so many improbabilities. There were a lot of questions that remain unanswered.
If someone comes to you and they really believe that this child that they're seeing is in fact their child, as a detective, you cannot make an assumption that it is or is not her child. At this point, we're just there to prove either one way or another. I personally felt a lot of responsibility to find out who is this little girl.
My name is Antoinette Vera. Carolyn is my sister-in-law. Carolyn and I were very close. She was a very devoted friend, and she would always help if you needed help. Carolyn and the family moved to Willingboro, New Jersey in the 70s. Willingboro is a fairly nice town to grow up in. Carolyn had 3 children. In 1997, she had told us that she was pregnant. The 18th of December, 1997, Carol shows up at my home and tells my husband and I that she had given birth to a baby girl. I first saw Aaliyah when she was approximately 5 days old and instantly fell in love with her. Instantly, with her big bright eyes, her beautiful dimple. Carolyn was a single mother of 4 children at that point, so it was difficult. Having a toddler and a young child, giving Aaliyah the time that she needed. Carolyn was working at a pharmacy at that point. She was working a lot. And Aaliyah, she spent 80% of her time and life at our home. Carolyn was busy, you know. Aaliyah, she had love and attention at our home. And that's what she craved, and that's what she got, unconditionally. I loved her as if she was my daughter. I loved Aaliyah as if she was my daughter. Aaliyah called me Mommy and called Carolyn Mommy Carol. Aaliyah was probably the happiest, smartest, friendliest child I have ever met. Aaliyah was so beautiful and cute. She was signed up to do modeling by an agency. She had, you know, professional headshots. Aaliyah was the biggest performer. We always had Sunday dinners at my home, and she would put on a show. My sons would be there.
My name is Jeffrey Vera Jr. Carolyn Correa is my aunt. She is my father's sister. This is my mom. I was 12 when Aaliyah was born. To me, you know, she was just another one of my cousins that we grew to love. Growing up, Aaliyah and I had a big brother, little sister relationship. I was always there to protect her and watch out for her as a kid. My dad loved Aaliyah like a father. My brother loved Aaliyah like a sister. And my mom absolutely loved her like a mother.
Aaliyah, to me, was the daughter I never had. February 2004, I received a call from Carol. She said, "There's detectives here." Of course, I had no idea. My life changed forever.
We had to get our foot into the door. We had to get into this investigation, and the only way to do that was to contact Caroline and find out her account. What could she say to this accusation? Caroline lived in Willingboro, New Jersey. It's a single home, a nice home, middle-class neighborhood. She invited us in. We stood in her living room. We just did the formalities and told her exactly what our purpose was and what the nature of the investigation was, that she had been accused of arson and kidnapping a child. Any mother would be really upset. Most people would have been, "Get the hell out of my house, this is a lie." What could she say to this accusation? And she said, "No, that child's my child." We asked if Aaliyah was home. She was not. We asked her if she would cooperate with the investigation. She assured us she would. We gave her a buccal swab to get her DNA. We asked her if she had a photograph of Aaliyah. And she went and she provided us a photograph. She said, yeah, that's Aaliyah. Okay. Now at least we have a photograph of this child. Before we left Carol's house, she agreed that she would come over with Aaliyah to the police department because we were going to do a DNA analysis to prove who's telling the truth here. And she seemed encouraged to that, and she said she would. We went to Evelyn's house. Evelyn is Pedro's sister, and she would be able to help us. She was friends with Carolyn. They were very good friends. And she had known Aaliyah. So we showed her the photograph that Correa gave us. I said, is that Aaliyah? Evelyn said, that's not Aaliyah. That shocked her. That fake photograph, that shocked her.
You had a baby and this is your child, and now you're being investigated by the police. Why would you give them a different picture? If it's really your child, why would you just not give them a picture of the child?
It raised an eyebrow.
I received a call from Carol. I was at work. She had said, there's detectives here and they're saying Aaliyah isn't my baby. Come here as soon as you can. I was at work and I couldn't, ask too many questions, so I left work. I got there, the police had already been gone. Carol said that Pedro's wife was saying Aaliyah is her baby and she stole her. I thought Lucida was wrong. This woman's crazy.
Carolyn said she was going to come to the police station with Aaliyah. When she didn't show up on time at the police department, we called her and she said no, she wouldn't be coming, that she had hired an attorney. When she didn't show up as agreed, it made us worry even more, and she was going to flee.
It's like playing poker. She had already been shown some of the cards. She now knows the police are involved.
And that made us really accelerate the application to get the DNA.
Time's ticking for us now.
My name is Aaliyah Hernandez. I was named after the singer Aaliyah, R&B singer, the one who sang 1 in a Million. 6 years old, I had my mother, Carolyn. I had 3 older siblings. I was a little bit of a burden, me being the little annoying sister. I was very happy and confident. I loved being around people. I loved getting to know people. I made friends really easily in school. We were a normal family, And I didn't realize that in February 2004, my life was going to change forever. I remember one day that I was 6 years old. My mom was getting dressed to go out. And she told me, she's like, there's a very bad lady that wants to take you away from me. She wants to take you, but you're not gonna let her take you, right? I was sad, I was nervous, and I was just really confused. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna let her take me. I'm gonna tell her she can't have me. So I just thought, this woman is trying to steal me away. I don't remember her actually telling me the details of why that lady was gonna take me. I just remember her saying, somebody wants to take you from me, but I don't remember her explaining why. So that was really the only thing I remember about what was to come.
I needed to take this little girl's DNA. But in order to get DNA, you would need a search warrant. So I work on my search warrant application. Probably the most significant thing was we were actually unable to locate a birth certificate. If it's really her child, then she should have a birth certificate. Prosecutor at that time felt that there was enough meat on the bones, so to speak, to get a search warrant approved. So I was able to make an appointment with a Superior Court judge. He read the application and he issued the search warrant in order for us to take the DNA from both Carolyn and Aaliyah. So the very next day, we were able to get the search warrant approved to then take the DNA.
After Carol told me about the detectives being at her house, they were knocking on my door. Told them answered every question they could ask. No holds barred. Told them everything. Gave them photos. I was so scared for Aaliyah. Of course I was. That was my concern, her welfare.
I knew something was coming. Like, I felt it. Like, I was like, okay, something is gonna happen soon. And then eventually that's when I went actually in to get my DNA test done.
So we were scheduled to serve the search warrant on February 24th at the lawyer's office around 4 p.m.
Carol showed up with Aaliyah. She was a cute little kid. She was well-dressed. She's a pretty little girl.
She's a 6-year-old that has no idea who any of us are, and here we're sticking these giant Q-tips in her mouth, right? So Detective Stone, talked to her a little bit, and she said, do you have a boyfriend at school? And Aaliyah replied that she did, but her boyfriend was in Florida, and that her mommy was going to take her to see her boyfriend. So you could imagine all of us looking at each other with, big eyes. That they were planning a trip to Florida was concerning. If we leave Aaliyah in Carolyn's custody, where is she gonna go?
I didn't know why I had to get a DNA test done, and I was with my mom. It was a big place, but then again, everything looks big to you when you're a child, but I remember it being a really, really open space.
So we were able to get samples of Aaliyah's DNA through buccal swabs that we took of her mouth, and it was sent off to the Philadelphia Police Crime Lab.
Then we told Carolyn that she would not be leaving with Aaliyah, because until the DNA results were in, we were going to put her in foster placement under the auspices of New Jersey Children and Youth.
Aaliyah was taken to emergency foster placement in New Jersey. Aaliyah didn't have any possessions of her own because we didn't make any sort of notification prior. That would be like showing her hand, which we're not gonna do. She had no comforts of her own or comforts from home or clothes, nothing.
I do remember being separated from her and being upset and being like, why are you, taking me from my mom? I didn't know why, they were taking me away. I remember crying and not wanting to be taken away and being really, really sad. But I remember her just telling me, you're gonna be fine. I'm gonna see you again.
And I assured Carolyn that we would expedite this processing, and if we were wrong, Aaliyah would be returned with our sincerest apologies. The lab worked round the clock to get results because they understood. We took a child from her mother on the say-so of somebody from Philadelphia. Come on, really? That was a pretty awful responsibility that we undertook, but a righteous one.
The little girl I saw that day was very happy. She was clean and neat, nothing about her. She looked well nourished. There was nothing about her that, sent up red flags for us as the police. When you see her, you're reminded that if she is in fact Delamar, then that you're probably about to destroy her whole world. And how do you reconcile that? You're the police and you're supposed to be helping people, and we were. But we have a face, we have a person, a living, breathing person in front of us that we're about to destroy. And that's difficult.
Wow. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I felt really bad. I'm sorry.
I was a senior in high school and came home from school one day and police were sitting at my kitchen table, and after they left, my parents called me and my brother into the dining room and they explained to us what happened. It was tough for everybody. My mother hasn't been the same since that day.
Sunday morning, I was getting ready to eat breakfast and my phone rang. It was the lab director. They had worked around the clock to get results. They had several people working on it, and it is a complicated process. It's not easy. And they put this case ahead of all other cases. The lab director told me that the match had been made, and the truth was now known. There's no question about it. Aaliyah is Delamar, and she's the daughter of Lucida and Pedro.